Welcome to the deep dive. Let's get right into it today. Debt. It's something so many people grapple with, that feeling of being stuck, even when you really, really want to get out from under it.
Yeah, and you might even think the only way is just slashing everything,
Yeah,
living on the bare minimum.
exactly.
Yeah,
And while cutting back definitely has a role, thinking that extreme sacrifice is the only answer, that's a big misconception we see.
it really is. So today we want to dig into three sort of key mistakes that often trip people up, and more importantly, look at some smarter, maybe more sustainable ways to tackle debt without making life miserable.
Right. We've looked at the common themes, and yeah, three things keep coming up. First, a lot of folks just don't know the real total amount they owe. Sounds basic, but it's huge.
Hmm.
Second, just making those minimum payments and it feels like you're doing something, but it can be a real trap. And third, this idea of only focusing on cutting costs, it often misses a really powerful alternative. So let's start with that first one, not knowing your total debt. Why is that such a fundamental block?
Well, it really comes down to knowing the terrain, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, imagine trying to plan a big hike, but you don't know how long the trail is or where the end point is.
Okay.
You might start walking, but are you actually making progress? With debt, if you don't know the total amount, you're kind of just wandering financially. You don't have that clear target.
That's a great way to put it. Like training for a race without knowing if it's a 5K or a marathon, you need to know the scale of the challenge, right?
Precisely. So there are a few absolutely critical pieces of information you need to get a handle on.
Okay, what are they?
First, obviously, the grand total. Add up everything. Second, who do you actually owe?
Mm-hmm.
List out every single creditor.
Right.
Third, and this is really key, the interest rate on each separate debt.
Mm.
Because, they're not all the same. Some hurt you way more than others.
Mm-hmm. That 20% credit card versus the 5% loan, big difference.
Exactly. And fourth, just a rough idea, based on what you're paying now, how long it would actually take to clear each debt, the estimated timeline.
Okay, total, creditors, interest rates, timeline. Got it. And what kind of debts are we typically talking about here?
Oh, it's usually the usual suspects. Credit cards are a big one, often several cards with different balances, different rates.
Yeah.
Then you have installment loans like car loans, personal loans maybe. Student loans, of course, can be a major chunk for many people.
Sure.
And sometimes you even see newer things creeping in, like those buy now, pay later plans. They seem small individually, but they can add up fast if you're not careful.
It definitely sounds like it could get complicated quickly. Is there an easy way for people to consolidate all that info and see it clearly?
Yeah, thankfully, technology helps a lot here. There are apps specifically built for this. In the U.S., something like Undebt is pretty popular. For Canadians, Hard Bacon is a good option. These tools let you plug in all your different debts, and then they show you the big picture, the total, your progress. You can even model different payment plans. It takes the guesswork out.
That sounds super useful. Just seeing it all in one place must be a relief, even if the number is scary. You mentioned a story, someone named Julie. How did seeing the real number affect her?
Yeah, so Julie, she's 35, and she kind of felt her debt was manageable. She guessed maybe around $10,000, mostly some credit cards, her car loan. She wasn't actively avoiding it, but hadn't tallied it all up precisely.
Okay, sort of an estimate in her head.
Exactly. Then she used one of these apps, put everything in. Turns out she had 5 credit cards with balances, plus the car loan. The actual total wasn't $10,000, it was $19,800.
Wow, nearly double what she thought. How does she react to that?
Well, she said it was a real aha moment. A bit overwhelming at first, sure, but then it quickly turned into determination. Seeing that actual number, $19,800, made it real in a way the vague $10K guess never did.
So it wasn't just depressing, it was actually motivating.
Yeah, it lit a fire under her, basically. It moved her from just passively knowing she had some debt to actively figuring out, okay, how do I attack this specific number? Facing that reality was the push she needed.
Okay, so step one is crucial. Face the facts, get the real number, makes total sense. Now let's talk about error number two. Only making minimum payments. It's tempting, right? Especially if cash is tight. But why is it such a bad strategy long term?
Well, fundamentally, minimum payments are set up to benefit the lender, not really you, the borrower. They're usually calculated as a tiny percentage of your balance,
Right.
which means most of your payment just goes to cover the interest that piled up that month. Only a very small amount, sometimes pennies, actually chips away at the principal of the original amount you borrowed.
So you're mostly just treading water.
Exactly. It keeps you in debt for way longer, sometimes decades, and allows the lender to collect a whole lot more interest from you over that time.
You had a pretty stark analogy for this earlier, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Trying to pay off significant debt with only minimum payments. It's kind of like trying to put out a blazing house fire with, like, a spray bottle.
Okay, yeah. Not very effective.
You're doing something, technically, but the impact is just negligible compared to the size of the problem.
That paints a clear picture. Let's put some numbers on it. You had an example with a $5,000 credit card debt.
Yes. So imagine you owe $5,000 on a credit card, pretty standard, with a 19.99% APR. It's a common rate.
Okay.
If you only make the minimum payment, let's say it's $100 a month to start, do you know how long it takes to pay it off?
I'm guessing a long time.
Almost 30 years.
30 years. For $5,000.
30 years. And the really painful part, over those 3 decades, you'd pay something like $7,000, maybe even more, just in interest, on top of the original $5,000.
That is staggering, just by sticking to the minimum. So what's the flip side? What if you pay more?
The difference is dramatic. Let's say instead of $100, you manage to pay $250 a month on that same $5,000 debt.
Okay, more than double the minimum.
Right. You'd pay it off completely in under 2 years, not 30, 2.
Wow.
And the total interest you'd pay, it drops massively. You'd save thousands of dollars just by making those higher payments.
That's incredibly powerful. It really shows how minimum payments are, well, a trap. So, okay, someone knows their total debt. They're convinced not to just pay the minimum. What are the smarter ways to actually pay it down?
Good question. There are 2 main strategies people use, and they're both effective, just in different ways. The first is called the avalanche method.
Avalanche, okay.
With this one, you list all your debts and you prioritize them by interest rate, highest rate first. You pay the minimum on everything except the debt with the absolute highest interest rate. Any extra money you have goes towards attacking that high interest debt aggressively.
Okay, so you tackle the most expensive debt first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mathematically, this saves you the most money on interest over the long haul because you're getting rid of the costliest debt fastest.
That makes logical sense. What's the other strategy?
The other popular one is the snowball method. This one is less about pure math and more about psychology and motivation.
Snowball. How does that work?
Here, you list your debts not by interest rate, but by balance size, from the smallest dollar amount to the largest.
Okay, smallest balance first.
Right. Again, you pay the minimum on all debts, except the one with the very smallest balance. You throw all your extra cash at that smallest debt until it's gone. Poof.
Ah, so you get a quick win.
Precisely. Once that smallest debt is paid off, you take the money you were paying on it, the minimum plus the extra, and add it to the minimum payment of the next smallest debt.
So the payment amount snowballs as you knock off debts.
Exactly. Each time you pay one off, you free up more cash to attack the next one. Seeing those debts disappear one by one can be incredibly motivating and helps people stick with the plan, even if it might cost slightly more in interest compared to the avalanche method over the very long term.
Interesting. So avalanche for maximum financial efficiency, snowball for psychological momentum. Both sound way better than just the minimum payments. Okay, that brings us to the third common mistake. Relying only on cutting back. You know, the classic advice, ditch the coffee, cancel Netflix. Does that stuff really move the needle?
Well, look, those small cuts can free up some cash. Absolutely. Every little bit helps, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with focusing only on sacrifices, well, 2 things. One, it's often not sustainable. Life gets pretty grim if you cut out all the small joys.
Yeah, it can lead to burnout, feeling deprived.
Totally. And 2, there's a hard limit to how much you can cut. You still need basics. Housing, food, transport. You can only trim so much fat.
Right. You can cut expenses down to 0, theoretically, but not practically. There's a floor.
Exactly. But think about the other side of the coin.
Income.
Income. While there's a limit to cutting expenses, is there really a hard limit on how much you can potentially earn?
Good point. Theoretically, no.
So shifting some of your focus from only restriction to actively finding ways to increase your income, that can be a much more powerful and honestly more empowering way to tackle debt faster. It creates more breathing room.
Okay, I like the sound of that. More proactive, less depressing than just cutting everything. But for someone maybe working full-time already, feeling stretched, how realistic is just earning more money? What are some practical things people can actually do?
No, it doesn't have to mean getting a second full-time job or a massive career change, though those are options for some. Think smaller, more manageable things first. Do you have a skill you could freelance?
Like writing, graphic design, maybe administrative help?
Exactly. Platforms like Fiverr or Upwork connect people for those kinds of gigs. Or look around your house, have stuff you don't use anymore. Clothes, electronics, furniture.
Sell it online. Marketplaces like eBay or Facebook Marketplace.
Yep, it can bring in a surprising chunk of cash sometimes. Or think locally. Could you offer services in your neighborhood? Babysitting, pet sitting, maybe tutoring if you have expertise in a subject?
Simple stuff, but it adds up.
It really can. Maybe you're good at video editing or helping people with basic tech support. And, for those with a bit more drive, maybe exploring a small side hustle online. A simple e-commerce store, maybe even one of those faceless YouTube channels sharing information.
Right, these seem like things you could potentially fit around a main job rather than totally replacing it.
That's the idea. Leverage skills you already have or assets you already own. The key takeaway is shifting that mindset. It's not just about deprivation. It's also about creation, creating more income.
So you can still maybe afford that coffee sometimes because you found another way to bring in some extra cash to put towards the debt.
Precisely. It's about expanding your financial capacity, not just shrinking your life down to the bare bones. More sustainable, usually more effective in the long run.
This has been really insightful, a much more balanced and frankly hopeful perspective on getting out of debt. So if we were to boil it down, what's the core message for listeners today?
I think the main thing is that overcoming debt doesn't have to mean completely overhauling your life and giving up everything you enjoy. It's really about getting smart and strategic, gaining clarity and taking control.
And the key actions we discussed were?
First, get crystal clear on your actual financial situation. Know the total debt, who you owe, those interest rates. No more guessing.
Right. Face the numbers.
Second, ditch the minimum payment trap. Choose a deliberate repayment strategy like the avalanche or snowball, and be aggressive.
Okay. Pay more than the minimum, strategically.
And third, don't just focus on cutting back. Actively look for ways, even small ways, to boost your income. Shift from feeling like a victim of your budget to proactively generating more resources.
Fantastic summary. And like you said, these are steps people can start thinking about, maybe even acting on today without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's about consistent, informed steps, not necessarily giant, painful leaps. That's what leads to lasting change.
Well, if this deep dive has been helpful and you want more practical advice on money management, budgeting, and debt strategies, definitely hit subscribe to The Deep Dive.
And maybe one final thought to leave everyone with today. Just take a minute right now and think. What's one skill you have, even a small one, or one thing you own that's just sitting there, that you could potentially use to make even a little extra money? Don't just think about what you can cut. What could you create or leverage? That might be the most empowering first step you take.